Have you ever sat in a German class for 2 or 3 hours only to walk out feeling even more confused than before? Maybe your teacher spoke only German from the very first minute. Or maybe the class wasn't fully in German, but it was so grammar heavy that after a few weeks you knew words like nominative, accusative, and dative, but you still couldn't confidently make an appointment or have a simple conversation with your neighbor. If that sounds familiar, I want you to know you're definitely not alone. I hear this from German learners every single week. People who have spent months, sometimes even years, in traditional German classes but still don't feel confident using German in real life. And that's the problem. A lot of traditional German classes are not actually designed for learners who want to speak German in everyday situations. So in this video, I'm going to explain why so many traditional German classes fail beginner learners, why you may have felt frustrated or discouraged in the past, and what actually works better if your goal is to become confident, conversational, and independent in German. And if we haven't met yet, hallo und herzlich willkommen. I'm Salome, a native German teacher and founder of the German Fluency Academy. I help English native speakers learn German in a clear, structured, and practical way so they can actually use German in daily life. And if you're currently starting from scratch, or if German has felt confusing and overwhelming so far, I created a free beginner training just for you. Inside, I walk you through the most important foundations for getting started successfully: pronunciation, daily life conversations, practical phrases you can start using right away, and simple grammar structures that help you start forming your own sentences without overwhelming grammar. So if you want access to that free training, comment "Get Started" below and I'll send you the link. All right, let's talk about why traditional German classes often don't work for adult learners, especially when you're just getting started. Number one reason is full immersion too early does not help beginners. And I know full immersion sounds great, right? It sounds like, well, if the teacher only speaks German, then I'll learn German faster, right? But for total beginners, this can become incredibly overwhelming because when you're just starting to learn German, you don't have anything to connect the language to yet. And your brain needs anchors, it needs context, it needs something familiar to attach the new information to. When a teacher speaks only German to you from day one and you understand almost nothing, your brain is not thinking, "Oh, wonderful, I'm absorbing German naturally." Your brain is usually thinking, "I have no idea what is going on." Now, don't get me wrong, exposure can be helpful once you already have a foundation. But if you are at A0 or early A1, full immersion can feel like being dropped into the middle of the ocean and being told, "Just swim." But nobody has shown you how to move your arms. Nobody has explained what to do when you panic. And then when you struggle, you start blaming yourself. You think, maybe I'm just not good at languages. But the real issue is that the method skipped the foundation. And I've heard so many stories like this from learners over the years. People who have sat 3 hours intensive German classes where the teacher only spoke German and they spent the entire time trying to guess what was happening. Then they went home exhausted and had to figure out the actual explanations all by themselves after already sitting there for hours. That is incredibly frustrating, and honestly, I don't blame anyone for becoming discouraged with German after an experience like this. I've actually made a whole separate video on why the full immersion method often fails total beginners, and I'll link that below if you want to go deeper into that topic. The main idea is this: immersion is not bad. Immersion too early and without connection to something you already understand is the problem. Adult learners usually learn best when new German concepts are connected to something they already know. For English speakers, that often means using English strategically. Not translating every single word forever, not making English the center of the lesson, but using it as a bridge. Then over time, you can increase the amount of German input. But if you skip the clarity phase, many adult learners simply shut down. Now, let's say your class is not fully immersive. Maybe the teacher does explain things in English. That can already be better. But then we often run into the second problem. Many traditional German classes are extremely grammar heavy. They follow a textbook chapter by chapter, page by page, exercise by exercise. And I want to be fair here. I'm not saying every teacher who uses a textbook is a bad teacher. Textbooks can be useful. They can provide structure. They can make planning easier. But the problem is when the textbook becomes the entire method. When the class is basically, well, today the textbook says we do accusative, so we do accusative. Next week the textbook says we do separable verbs, so we do separable verbs. And the learner is sitting there thinking, okay, but when am I actually going to use all of this? This is where people get frustrated because they are usually not learning German just to collect grammar concepts, right? They're learning German because they want to function in real life. They want to be able to speak with their partner's family. They want to talk to their neighbors. They want to go to the doctors and feeling confident that they can handle this independently. They want to order food, make appointments, ask questions, and stop feeling dependent on English. So when the first contact with German is just abstract grammar, it can feel very disconnected from the life they are actually trying to build. And here's the thing, grammar is important. Of course it is. You do need grammar to speak German correctly, but grammar should not be the first wall that beginners crash into, especially not when it is taught without real life context. Because when grammar is disconnected from your daily life, it becomes so much harder to remember. You might understand the explanations during class, you might even get the worksheet right, but then 2 days later when you're standing at the bakery and someone asks you what you want, nothing comes out because your brain never practiced using that grammar in a real life situation. It only practiced recognizing it in a textbook exercise, and those are two very different skills. That's also why random example sentences are so unhelpful. You know the kind of sentences I mean, right? The blue elephant is drinking milk, or the turtle reads the newspaper in the bathtub. And you're there thinking, okay, maybe I understood the grammar concept here, but when am I actually ever going to say this? Why not use sentences that are actually connected to your real life? For example, ich hätte gern einen Kaffee. And then understanding that einen Kaffee needs to be an accusative here because it's the direct object. Or ich brauche einen Termin. Same thing, understanding here that ein Termin changes to einen Termin because of the accusative case. Or ich wohne seit 3 Monaten in Deutschland, and understanding here that the time needs to go before the place in German sentence structure. These sentences still teach grammar, but they also help you to function. That is the missing bridge. The problem is not the grammar itself. The problem is grammar without context. And that's exactly why inside the German Fluency Academy, we connect grammar to real life situations. We don't just teach grammar as isolated theory. We teach it as a tool that helps you say what you actually need to say. And if that is the kind of approach you want, where grammar finally connects to daily life and you understand how to move from theory into application, comment get started below. I'll send you access to my free beginner training where we go through pronunciation, daily life conversations, practical phrases, and simple sentence structure so you can start using German without getting buried in grammar. So just comment get started below to get access. Another big reason traditional classes often don't work well for adult learners is the pace. Group classes have to move at one pace, but adult learners do not all learn at one pace. Most people need more repetition. Most people need more practice. Most people need to hear things many times before they actually stick. But also most people are working full-time, raising kids, relocating, dealing with paperwork, culture shock, and a million other things. And then they go to a class once or twice a week, and if they miss one session, they feel behind immediately. The class keeps moving, but they are still trying to understand what happened 2 chapters ago. And this creates a silent shame because adult learners often don't want to hold the group back, right? So they don't want to ask every question. They often pretend they understood, or they tell themselves, well, I'll review that later. But later they're tired or busy or overwhelmed, and then the gaps start growing. And this is one of the biggest problems with traditional classes. They often give you information, but they don't always give you enough reinforcement. And reinforcement is what adult learners need. You don't learn German because someone explains something once. You learn German because you hear it, you understand it, you repeat it, you use it, you forget it a little, you review it again, use it again, and slowly make it automatic. That process takes structure, it takes repetition, and it takes a clear roadmap. Not just, here is chapter 5, good luck. Adult learners need to know, what am I learning right now? Why am I learning it? How does this help me speak? What should I practice after the lesson? How do I know I'm making progress? And what comes next? Without that clarity, people start jumping between random resources, right? One day it's a textbook, the next day it's an app, then it's a podcast, then it's a YouTube video, then it's flashcards, and then it's another course. And none of these resources are necessarily bad, but if they're not connected, they can make you feel even more confused. This is why structure matters so much. Not rigid structure, not boring structure, but a clear path. Especially for beginners. Because when you are starting out, you don't know what you don't know. You need someone to say, start here, practice this, don't worry about that yet, this will come later. This kind of guidance is incredibly calming, and it helps you progress without constantly questioning whether you're doing the right thing. The next reason why it takes so much longer with traditional classes to actually see progress is that many of them simply do not include enough real speaking practice. And I don't mean repeating a sentence after the teacher, and I don't mean reading a dialogue from the textbook with a partner either. I also don't mean filling in blanks and then saying the answer out loud. Those things can be useful, especially for your pronunciation, but they are not the same as actual speaking practice. Actual speaking practice means you have an idea, you choose the words, you build a sentence, you say it out loud, you make a mistake, you get feedback, and then you try again. This is the skill most learners actually need. But in a traditional class, especially a larger group, how much time do you really spend speaking? If there are 10, 12, or 15 students in the room and the class lasts 90 minutes or even 3 hours, your actual speaking time might be very small. Maybe you answer one question, maybe you read one sentence, maybe you do a partner exercise for a few minutes. But is that enough to become conversational? Usually not. And this is a big reason why people can complete months of German classes and still say, I understand some German, but I can't speak. And for adults, there is another layer: fear. People are often very aware of how they sound. And I don't know any language learner who does not go through this process, including myself. They're afraid of making mistakes. They don't want to sound stupid. They don't want to be judged. So even when speaking opportunities exist, many people hold back. They choose the safer option. They stay quiet. And then they leave class thinking, well, I really need to speak more. And this brings me to the final point. Traditional classes often focus on correctness before confidence. And I understand why, right? Like German has rules, German has cases, German has articles, German has word order, and yes, accuracy matters at some point. But if you make beginners feel like every mistake is a failure, they will stop trying. Adult learners especially need to feel safe making mistakes, because mistakes are not a sign that you're bad at German. Mistakes are just simply a part of the learning process. But many people's first experience with German is a strict teacher, complicated grammar explanations, and that feeling that they are always wrong. Just last week, I heard from a student that his previous German teacher used to yell at the students, adult students, simply for making mistakes. And honestly, if that's your first experience with learning German, of course you start to feel tense. Of course you hesitate. Of course you don't want to speak. And of course, at some point you might even dread learning German, because your brain has learned German equals being wrong, German equals embarrassment. But what we want instead is German helps me connect. German helps me feel independent. And German helps me build a life here. That is a completely different emotional foundation. And this is why early wins are not just nice, they are necessary. When a beginner successfully orders in German, that matters. When they greet a neighbor and get a German response, that matters. When they ask a simple question and the other person understands, that matters. Those moments build evidence in your brain. They prove I can do this. And once you start collecting those moments, your relationship with German starts to change. You stop seeing it as this huge, impossible thing, and you start seeing it as a skill you can build step by step. And this is something we focus heavily on inside the German Fluency Academy every single week in our community. In fact, we have a whole space dedicated just to sharing wins, because those small, real life moments matter so much. It might be someone ordering German for the first time, or having a short conversation with a neighbor, or understanding something at the doctor's office. These wins may look small from the outside or small compared to what you can do in your native tongue, but for a beginner learner, they are huge because every single one of them tells your brain, German is not just something I study, German is something I can actually use. Now, so if traditional classes often fail adult learners, what works better? Here's the approach I recommend. First, you want to start with pronunciation, because if you don't feel confident about how your German sounds, speaking will always feel intimidating. Pronunciation is not about sounding perfect or sounding like a native speaker. It is about being understood clearly and feeling confident enough to open your mouth. Second, focus on daily life German early. Learn the phrases and sentence patterns you actually need in real situations. Things like ich hätte gern, ich brauche, können Sie mir helfen, ich lerne noch Deutsch, könnten Sie das bitte wiederholen. These phrases give you practical starting points. Third, connect grammar to real situations. Don't learn grammar as abstract theory first. Learn it through the situations where you actually need it. Fourth, practice speaking in small steps. You don't need to have a long conversation right from the get-go. You need sentence patterns, repetition, and simple speaking prompts to get you started. And fifth, choosing a learning environment that gives you clarity. You should always know what you're learning, why you're learning it, how to practice it, and how it connects to real life. If you have had a frustrating experience with traditional German classes, I want you to know this. You're not behind, you're not too old, you're not bad at languages. You may simply have been taught in a way that did not match how beginners actually learn best. And if you want a clearer, more practical way to start, I would love to invite you to my free beginner training. Inside, I'll walk you through the foundations I believe every beginner needs. Pronunciation so you feel more confident speaking, daily life conversations so you can start using German in real situations, practical phrases so you have words ready when you need them, and simple grammar structure so you can start building your own sentences without feeling overwhelmed. So if you want access, comment "Get Started" below and I'll send you the link. And if the immersion part of this video really resonated with you, make sure to watch this video next on why full immersion fails complete beginners. That will help you understand even more clearly why just surrounding yourself with German is often not enough when you're starting from zero and what to do instead. Das ist alles für heute. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen und bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss!